Chapter 4. My 12th year, we supposed, would be my last one with Aunt Cordelia, since I would be entering high school the next year and be going into town to live with Father. Therefore, Aunt Cordelia agreed that I might have a birthday party that spring, and the talk among the girls at school centered for a period of several weeks upon the social event of the season. Word of it got to Aggie Kilpin, who still sat in the center of a wide circle of peasants during the noon hour. Aggie gleefully told me that, yes, kid, she would be coming to my party too. I didn't think she would. Alicia Allison sent me a box of tiny pink notes and matching envelopes on which I could write, Miss Julie Trelling requests the pleasure, and so on. I spent a happy and satisfying hour in preparing these notes and addressing each tiny envelope. Aunt Cordelia had said boys and girls, or just girls, when I had suggested the party, and I had decided in favor of just girls, including some of the girls from town. Since she hadn't demurred at the exclusion of boys, I rather hoped that she would not notice one other omission. She did, of course. Ruffling through the little pile of envelopes, she said quietly, "Julia, you have forgotten to include Agnes." "Oh, Aunt Cordelia, I can't. I simply can't have Aggie. She would spoil the whole party. You know that." "She knows about your party, Julia, and it has been something she's looked forward to for weeks. You can't do this to another child. It would be too cruel." "I can't invite her. I simply can't have the town girls thinking that she is my friend. I'm sorry for Aggie, awfully sorry, but let's face it, Aunt Cordelia, Aggie smells." Aunt Cordelia sighed. "Julia, that child has been in my classroom since she was 5. That means she's been there almost 10 years, and she has stood at my desk learning nothing but giving off a more unbearable stench each year. I know Agnes very well. I know that she's smelly, as you say, but I also know that if you stab her, she feels pain. I can't encourage cruelty on your part." I shook my head. "I'd rather not have a party if I have to ask her," I said shortly. "That's up to you, Julia. Think it over," Aunt Cordelia answered. I made my decision. The little pink envelopes went into the wastebasket, and I had to tell all the girls at school that there would be no party. There was general indignation directed toward Aunt Cordelia, indignation coming from my closest friends, from some of their mothers, even from Aggie, who muttered that Miss Cordelia was mean to Julie, never once suspecting that she herself was the cause of all our broken plans. Aunt Cordelia maintained her usual calm. No one of us was fool enough to believe that she would change her mind, though the whole school should rise in mutiny. Her only nod to our disappointment was a casual remark that, although the party had been canceled, there would be birthday cake for everyone, a remark that delighted the boys, who had not been especially pained at the disappointment of the girls in the first place. Father never interfered with Aunt Cordelia's disciplinary measures, but I think that he felt a little sorry for me at this time. He came out and took me for a long drive the night before my birthday, and he brought me a silver pen and a quire of good white paper in a leather box, material for the stories I wanted to write. Alicia sent me a gift, too, a beautifully bound volume of Edna St. Vincent Millay's poems. In a little note, Alicia said, "There is something about you, Julie, that reminds me of Millay's early poems. Read them now and save the darker ones for later years." She had placed her note in the book so that it opened to the lines, God, I can push the grass apart and lay my finger on your heart. And turning a few pages, I found lines that mirrored an ache and longing I had so often felt when the beauty around my woods cathedral was too intense, when the need to grasp and keep loveliness left me with a sense of desolate frustration. Thy winds, thy wide gray skies, thy mists that roll and rise, thy woods this autumn day that ache and sag, and all but cry with color, that gaunt crag, to crush, to lift the lean of that black bluff. World, world, I cannot get thee close enough. When I was through, my eyes were wet, and I loved not only Malay, but Alicia and Laura and Aunt Cordelia, almost everyone in the world except poor little Aggie Kilpin. Compassion was not yet aroused within me, and the better nature that loved poetry and beauty was completely overshadowed the day of my 12th birthday. Aunt Cordelia drove her car to school that morning because she was taking the 2 huge angel food cakes that she had baked and iced the night before. I was invited to cut the cakes at noon, and after sliding each piece on a napkin to place my birthday offering on each pupil's desk. It was a poor substitute for a party, and most of the girls felt as downcast and low-spirited that noon as I did. But not Aggie. She grinned in delight when I placed the cake before her, and she clambered out of her seat when she saw the rest of us preparing to go outside. "I won't be queen today, kid," she garbled eagerly. "I'm going to set by you 'cause it's your birthday. I'm going to be your best friend." And then I did it, a thing one does not forget. I turned on an innocent human being in fury, and I threw Aggie's love for me back into her simple, uncomprehending face. "Don't you dare follow me, Aggie. Don't you dare come near me," I told her, and I didn't care in the least what measures of discipline Aunt Cordelia might think up for me. I flashed a hostile look toward Aunt Cordelia as I strode past her desk, and I noticed that she looked quite tired and a little drawn. She said nothing to me, but she held out her hand to Aggie. "Would you like to go with the little children and me, Agnes? We're going out to the woods to get a bunch of wildflowers for Julia's birthday." Aggie seemed to be afraid of me after that. She would grin timidly at me and nod her head as if encouraging me to be kind. Sometimes, in shame, I returned her smile, but it was always a weak thing, and Aggie was never reassured. I did not read Edna St. Vincent Millay's poems during those last few weeks of school. Belatedly, I had a miserable feeling that the gentle young poet would not have liked me. It was a hot, dry summer that year, and in early August, when the heat seemed almost unbearable, we heard that Agnes Kilpin was very ill with a fever resulting from the infection of a cut foot for which she had received no medical attention. Aunt Cordelia immediately drove up to the Kilpins, taking ice and cool fruit drinks with her. That evening she told me something of the condition in which she had found Aggie and of the futility of trying to help her. I wanted to bathe the poor child and put clean sheets on her bed, but Mrs. Kilpin wouldn't allow me to touch her, said she wasn't going to have her girl catch pneumonia by having a bath. Aunt Cordelia closed her eyes briefly in exasperation. Afraid of pneumonia, but not of filth and the agony of heat and fever. I wanted to tie that woman up outside the room and see to it that Agnes was cared for properly, for just once in her life. A few days later, on a hot Sunday when tempers were shorter than usual, Aunt Cordelia and I had one of our not infrequent clashes. She had given my room a quick inspection after church that morning and had found its condition unsatisfactory. "You will put your books and clothing in their proper places, Julia, and you will dust the room, especially including the window sills, which I find absolutely white with dust. And understand this, Julia, no lady has a right to that title unless she is not only clean of body and clothing, but is equally clean in her surroundings. Never let it be said that you have grown up in my home and have been so remiss as to throw your discarded underclothing under the bed, which is exactly where I found yours just now. Her wrath was formidable. Mine was rather intense, too, for I felt that I might have been instructed to clean my room with considerably less sermonizing. Our clash was brief and bitter, and Aunt Cordelia was the victor. I spent the next hour converting the energy of rage into a zest for cleaning, which resulted in an immaculate state that would have satisfied any top sergeant. Aunt Cordelia inspected my work and nodded approvingly. I should think now that after a shower and a brief apology for your impertinence, you might feel very much better, Julia. I am very sorry that I was impertinent, Aunt Cordelia, I managed to say, and then fled for the bathroom and a shower. I wished, as I stood under the cooling, cleansing flood of water, that I were as fortunate as Uncle Haskell, living apart in the old carriage house, working on a magnum opus and communicating with Aunt Cordelia only infrequently. That was the afternoon that Carlotta Berry called, asking me to go driving with her. To receive an invitation to go driving with Lottie that summer was a coveted honor. Being an only child of unusually indulgent parents, Lottie had a great deal more in the way of clothes and expensive toys than most of us, and for her birthday that year she had received a gift that was the envy of all her classmates. The gift was a pony, a snowy, dainty-hoofed little creature, a wonderful gift in itself, but this one was harnessed to a wicker and patent leather cart. Carlotta had power in the possession of that pony cart. Those who pleased her might share it, but there were no rides for those who did not. I suppose no favors would be granted me that afternoon, but Aunt Cordelia was a much fairer person than I sometimes believed her to be. "I see no reason why you shouldn't go," she said pleasantly. "You have fulfilled your duties and are entitled to some recreation." "I can go," I told Lottie joyfully, and when she arrived, cool and pretty in blue and white organdy, Aunt Cordelia looked at me thoughtfully and suggested that I might wear the dress from Laura's wardrobe, which she had altered to fit me, a fine white linen embroidered with tiny wreaths of rosy flowers and tied with a gay sash. It was plain that Aunt Cordelia wanted me to look no less well dressed than the darling of the Berry household. Our gladiolas were in full bloom that week, and while I dressed, Aunt Cordelia cut a great armful of the bright flowers and then sat in the porch swing waiting for Carlotta and me to come downstairs. "Since you're going to be driving all around the neighborhood, I think it would be nice of you girls to take this bouquet to Agnes. You won't mind doing that, will you?" she asked. Aunt Cordelia was too much the voice of authority for either Carlotta or me to resist her suggestion. We didn't want to think of Aggie, much less to visit her, but a sense of decency, prodded by the determination which we knew was behind my aunt's quiet suggestion, led us to accept the errand. "Isn't it just like her?" Carlotta sputtered when we were out of hearing. "She spoils your party on account of Aggie, and now she spoils our afternoon by making us stop at the dirty Kilpins. Sometimes I can't stand Miss Cornelia. I mean it. I just can't stand her." I had been annoyed too, but at that speech I turned loyal niece and remarked that if Lottie didn't like my aunt, she might well have invited someone other than a relative of Aunt Cordelia's to go riding with her, and Lottie replied that since the pony and cart were hers, she might rescind her invitation. I wanted the ride enough to tolerate Carlotta's airs. Both of us were conscious that we made a pretty picture on the country road, our gay dresses and the bright flowers filling the little cart with color. Lottie's blonde hair and my black shining as brightly as the pony's silver coat. Uncle Haskell took off his hat and made us a sweeping bow when we met him driving home from town. And a mile or so farther on, Denny Trevert and Jimmy Ferris chased us on their bicycles, scorning our elegance, although we were pretty sure that they secretly envied us. "Oh, Katinka, Katanka," they shrilled in pained mockery. Then, riding close to the cart and holding on to the sides, they gave us the benefit of their supreme contempt. "Slurp, slurp," they added, as if the sight of us was a little more than either of them could bear. Their behavior bothered me a little. Danny was still as close to me as in the days when he and Chris and I rode and swam and skated together. Danny was often at Aunt Cordelia's, and I was just as often at his home, where gentle Mrs. Trevert always made me welcome. Now, in the presence of Carlotta and Jimmy, he was scornful of me, and I found myself acting as haughtily toward him as if we were foes of long standing. There is something wrong with this world, I thought, and then a few minutes later I found a world in which there was a greater wrong than I had ever known. Carlotta refused to go inside when we reached the Kilpin house. "I don't have to mind Miss Cordelia while it's summer vacation, Julie," she said, and I had to respect her point of view. "I guess you'll just have to take the flowers in yourself, since you can't help being her niece." She glanced back down the road, obviously hoping the boys would soon appear again. I climbed out of the elegant cart and crossed the road in some trepidation. I had heard stories of the Kilpins. They were trash, and vicious trash at that. The cluttered dooryard and the sagging front steps added to the ominous look of the place. I rather hoped that no one would hear my light knock on the half-open screen door. But Mrs. Kilpin had seen my approach, and she came to the door as soon as I knocked. She was a withered, bent woman with a narrow strip of forehead wrinkling above close-set, sullen eyes. She motioned me to come in, but she didn't speak. When I offered her the flowers and told her they were for Aggie, she nodded toward a table where I laid them, pretty sure that they wouldn't be touched until they were thrown away. Aggie was lying on a bed in the corner of the room. It was a filthy bed, sheetless and sagging in the middle, and Aggie rolled restlessly upon it, her mouth parched with fever and her eyes glazed and unseeing. The heat, the stench, and the closeness of death made the place so unbearable that I wanted nothing so much as to break away and run from it. Somehow, however, I managed to walk closer to the bed and speak to the girl who lay there. I really think that I half expected to see Aggie grin again, to hear her call me kid and declare that we were friends. But Aggie was another person that day. She was a part of the dignity of a solemn drama, no longer the phony queen seated in the center of a mocking circle of her subjects. Aggie was as indifferent to my presence as if I'd been one of the houseflies crawling along the edge of a spoon that lay on the table beside a bottle of medicine. I was awed and unsure of what I should do. "Is she going to get well?" I finally whispered to the shadowy woman who stood beside me. "No, she ain't a-going to get well. She's a-going to die," the woman said without emotion. "I'm sorry," I said, and Mrs. Kilpin answered in the same dead voice. "No, you ain't. You ain't sorry. Nobody's sorry that my girl's a-going to die. Not even her pa's sorry. Nobody." I couldn't answer that. "I guess I must go, Mrs. Kilpin," I said miserably. "I guess I'll have to go." "Yes, you go," she said, and I saw her eyes studying me from head to foot. "Them clothes is too fine for this place. You go long." I turned toward the bed with agony in my throat. If I could have kept Aggie from dying by ignoring the stench and the ugliness, it would have been such an easy thing to do. It would have been a privilege to put my cheek next to hers and to tell her that yes, I was her friend. But Aggie would not look at me, and her mother's look held only sullen hatred for me. I know that sometimes I've been mean to Aggie. I'm sorry, Mrs. Kilpin. I wish that you'd believe me. I'm really sorry. "I said that you'd best be getting on," Mrs. Kilpin said without looking at me. She pointed toward the door. When I was out of the house, I ran to the cart where Carlotta was waiting. "Hurry, Julie," she said, her doll-like face pink with anticipation. "We're going to go north at the corner. The boys just went that way, and I almost know they're hiding to surprise us. We won't even speak to them," she added, the instincts of the born coquette asserting themselves more strongly by the minute. "Take me home, Lottie," I said desperately as I climbed into the seat beside her. "Please, just take me home. Then you can do whatever you like." "Don't be silly, Julie. For goodness sake. Was it that bad? I didn't know you liked Aggie so much." "Will you take me home?" I asked her once again, my voice sharp because of the tumult inside me. "No, I won't. Your old aunt had to spoil things by making us come up here. My mother didn't say that I had to come and see Aggie, but I just brought you up here because I supposed that Miss Cordelia would have a fit if I didn't. Now I'm going to go wherever I please, and I just don't please to take you home." It wasn't the first time we had quarreled. Lottie and I were at swords' points as often as we were bound together in friendship. And beside the fact that our friendship was not very deep, the day was ghastly hot, and beyond the discomfort of heat, I was sickened by the glimpse I'd had of something terribly wrong in this world. I jumped from the seat into the dusty road. "Go right ahead," I told her. "I'll walk." "Very well, Miss Trelling," Carlotta said loftily, and off she drove, her pony and cart, her blonde curls and organdy dress as beautiful as a picture. There were 2 miles before me, and I was already tired. The thick yellow dust fell hot through my thin slippers, and the half-burned weeds stung when they swished about my bare ankles. It would have been a long and wretched walk if Danny hadn't rescued me, but he did, and there wasn't a trace of the taunts he had yelled at Carlotta and me hardly a half-hour earlier. "What's the matter, Julie?" he asked as he stopped his bicycle at my side. "What did Lottie do to you?" "Nothing. She just won't take me home." I looked at Danny bleakly. "I think Aggie is going to die, Danny, and her mother almost hates me. I can't ride around the country in a pony cart after I've seen Aggie and her mother." Danny looked down at the ground. Somehow the subject of death embarrassed us both. I wondered about it later. I rode for the remainder of the 2 miles home on the handlebars of Danny's bicycle. We didn't talk much, and Aunt Cordelia didn't say much either when I told her briefly what had happened. Some grease from the spokes of a wheel had soiled my white dress, but she didn't scold. She made cold lemonade for Danny and me, and the 3 of us sat together on the wide porch, all of us grave and thoughtful. Mrs. Kilpin had been right. We heard of Aggie's death the next morning, and Aunt Cordelia again drove up to the bare, wretched home where she and Mrs. Trevert and Mrs. Peters got Aggie ready for a decent burial. The 3 women looked pale and tired when they came back from the Kilpins that night. Aunt Cordelia and I sat together in the high-ceilinged library where a cross-current of air made the room cool and pleasant. "She's clean at last, poor little creature." Aunt Cordelia shuddered involuntarily when she spoke. "I washed her hair. It was a task the like of which I hope never to have to do again. But do you know, Julia, the child had pretty hair. When it was clean, I was able to press 2 big waves in it above her forehead. And when it dried, it was a deep brown color with bright lights in it. Aggie's hair clean, not only clean, but pretty. It seemed impossible, but I knew that it was true, or Aunt Cordelia would not have said so. I wish that Aggie could have known. It seemed such a terrible waste, ugliness all one's life, and something pretty discovered only after one was dead. I had never attended a funeral. Aunt Cordelia had always excused me from going with her for one reason or another. But 4 of us, Elsie Devers, Margaret Moore, Carlotta, and I, were pressed into attending Aggie's funeral. We carried big armfuls of flowers and followed Aggie's casket to the altar of the little country church. When I looked at Aggie lying in her coffin that afternoon, I was filled with wonder as I saw that she was gently, almost gracefully pretty in death. She was clean, so beautifully clean in the soft ivory-colored dress that my aunt and other neighbors had bought for her, a dress that would have sent Aggie into ecstasies if she could have had it while she lived. I noticed that her hair was indeed bright with copper lights in it, lights that sparkled when the afternoon sunlight channeled in through the church windows touched Aggie's head and face. It had been the filth and the stench and the silly grimaces, the garbled speech, and the stupid responses that had made Aggie revolting. And now she was pretty. But it was a prettiness touched with a cold aloofness that reproached and tormented me. I knew with a terrible certainty that I might beg her forgiveness until I was exhausted, that I might kneel before her as we had done in mockery when we first made her queen of the lunch hour, and that she would remain as coldly indifferent to me as I had once been to her. There was a poem of Sarah Teasdale's that I had heard Aunt Cornelia read many times. It hadn't meant much to me until that afternoon when I found, to my surprise, that I was able to recall every word of it. I whispered the lines to myself. When I am dead and over me bright April shakes out her rain-drenched hair, though you should lean above me broken-hearted, I shall not care. I shall have peace as lofty trees are peaceful, when rain bends down the bough, and I shall be more silent and cold-hearted than you are now. When we walked home after the funeral, Carlotta said, "You were saying poetry to yourself in the church, Julie. I think that's very bad manners, with poor Aggie lying there dead and all that." At twilight that evening, I wandered out to the carriage house, where Uncle Haskell sat on his porch, enjoying the light breeze that stirred the leaves of our surrounding wooded acres. He laughed lightly as I seated myself on the steps at his feet. "Your face, my treasure, has a funeral aspect this evening. Are you responding to our popular stereotype, the proper mourner who must tense his muscles for the correct number of days before he can cheerfully thank heaven that it was the other fellow and not he who had succumbed?" I didn't answer immediately. Sometimes Uncle Haskell seemed like a bad-mannered child, someone who deserved to be ignored. "Do you know what it means to feel guilty, Uncle Haskell?" I asked after a minute. "No. I thank whatever gods may be that no such emotion has ever disrupted my equanimity." He toyed for a while with the pipe which he always carried but never smoked. "Now why should you feel guilty, my little Julie? You know very well that if this Kilpin girl could approach you again, as moronic and distasteful as she was a month ago, that you'd feel the same revulsion for her. You couldn't help it." He was right, of course. I thought how awkward it would be to have to say, "Oh, Aggie, you were so nice when you were dead, and now here you are, the same old mess again." That wouldn't do, naturally. One couldn't say that, even to Aggie. Uncle Haskell was speaking again. Hadn't you rather thank heaven that she has escaped what life had to offer her? And isn't it a blessing that society escaped a multiplication of her kind? Come, Julie, death may be the great equalizer. Let's not give in to the hypocrisy that it is the great glorifier. We sat in silence after that, and I listened to the sounds of night around us. Uncle Haskell's words beat in upon me as I sat there. I knew that he expressed something that was true, but I knew as well that he was missing something. In Aggie's life and death there was something more than a distasteful little unfortunate's few barren years and her fever-driven death. But what it was I could not put into words. It was strange that I should have sought out a cynic such as Uncle Haskell with the hope of finding an answer. Finally I rose, the need for action of some sort strong within me. "I think I'll saddle Peter the Great and ride for a while," I said. Then for some reason I suddenly felt very sorry for Uncle Haskell. Obeying an impulse which I did not understand, I mounted the 5 steps up to the porch, and standing beside his chair, I bent and kissed him on his forehead. It was the first time in my life that I had ever done anything of the kind. He didn't move. He muttered, "Don't ride too far," and that was all. I ran out to the barn, saddled the big old horse, who was much gentler than his namesake, and rode away through the woods, pondering for the first time over the mysteries of life and death. Uncle Haskell's light was on when I returned, and I could see that he was working at his typewriter. That was unusual. His writings never seemed to reach his typewriter. One supposed, innocently at first, and then in mocking derision, that his magnum opus was being done in longhand. I slept rather late the next morning, and when I opened my eyes I saw the folded white paper which had been slipped underneath my door. I jumped out of bed to pick it up, and then propped myself comfortably against the pillows in order to enjoy whatever it was that I was about to read. The letter read as follows. Dear Julie, what you were seeking tonight was a good gray uncle, full of wisdom, and you came to an uncle who is neither good nor gray nor very wise. I am annoyed with you, my sweet. I do not like stepping out of character even for a little niece who kisses me good night, and by that token makes a vapid old fool of me. But I'll be for a few minutes your good gray uncle, full of wisdom. I'll say to my sad-faced little Julie, guilt feelings will do nothing for either you or the Kilpin child, but your compassion as you grow into womanhood may well become immortality for the girl you call Aggie. Uncle Haskell. I read his letter several times, and then secreted it in the little leather box where I hid other treasures. Hopefully, I half expected to find a changed Uncle Haskell that morning, a man who had given up lying and drinking and had awakened to his responsibilities to society. But he hadn't changed. He did not show by a single glance that he remembered the note he had written to me. Until next time.